Hey, guys. So I'm in a bit of a situation right now and I want to know what you guys think. I've read a lot of posts here but I'm not sure that the situation I'm in right now is very common, so please bear with me. I, 28F, have been married to my husband, 30M, for 10 months, and before getting married, we dated for a year. I knew him back in high school but we reconnected only a year ago through social media. Things were nice at first while we were dating. He was charming and really sweet, so I fell for him pretty hard. 1 year into the relationship, I accidentally got pregnant and initially wanted to terminate the pregnancy since I didn't think I was ready for a baby, but he convinced me to keep the baby. He reassured me that he'd take care of the expenses and I wouldn't have to worry about any of that, which was the biggest of my concerns. After a few weeks of convincing, I agreed to have the babies and moved in with him as well. 3 months after I found out I was pregnant, he proposed to me and I said yes because we were already living together and things were going well. We got married within 2 weeks of the proposal and it was a small and intimate ceremony. Everything was smooth sailing relationship-wise until we found out that we were having twins at 6 months. Then, things started going a little awry and my husband started distancing himself from me. I tried not to take it to heart because I really wanted to believe that I'd made the right choice, but with time, I was less and less sure of it because the closer I got to my due date, the more the distance between my husband and I increased. I confronted him about it several times but he told me that he was fine, just nervous about the babies and that's all. I took his word for it and tried not to worry too much, but I couldn't help it. About a month and a half ago, I finally gave birth to 2 beautiful twin daughters and I couldn't have been more thrilled about it. My husband seemed happy, but that didn't last for long, and in fact, he went back to his usual distant and glum self once my daughters were born. He would do everything but wouldn't talk to me and I felt like he didn't even love me or the kids anymore. And then he finally proved me right a week ago by saying that he wanted to give one of our daughters up for adoption because this wasn't part of the plan and he wanted to save money for the future. By the future, he meant that he wanted to save money so that he could start his own business later on in life, but with twins, that wouldn't be possible because the expenses of having a child were now doubled. I was shocked that he would even suggest something like this, but he was quite serious. He told me that he'd been planning to quit his 9-to-5 job for a while now and had wanted to do it in a couple of years, but having to spend money on raising 2 kids as opposed to 1 would set him back by several years, so this is the easiest solution he could find. I'm obviously against it and we got into a huge fight over it. We didn't speak for days after that fight, and yesterday, I finally made up my mind to leave him. I told him that I wanted to end this marriage because I couldn't stay with a man who was willing to just give one of our kids up, but he got really upset when I said that. He told me that he didn't intend to seem cruel and that he truly did love both his daughters equally. But he also wanted to have a future for himself and he really hated his job, which is what his excuse for his crappy behavior was. I desperately wanted to slap him back to his senses and make him realize how insane he was being, but instead, I chose to deal with the situation with a cool mind. I told him that I'd agree to let him give one of our daughters up for adoption if and only if he agreed to let me claim 75% of whatever his income would be once he did manage to start his own business, and he'd also continue to pay 50% of the expenses as child support for the daughter who would be put up for adoption until she turned 18. I told him that I'd talk to a lawyer and have the contract drawn up as soon as possible if he agreed to my conditions right now, and would contact an adoption agency at the earliest without question if he said yes. He was dumbstruck when I said that, but after contemplating for a few seconds, he told me that I was being unfair and that I didn't understand how much his startup idea meant to him. He told me he even had friends on board for whenever they'd saved enough and that he'd done a lot of research about investors and whatnot as well, so keeping one of the kids would only delay his future plans. He pleaded with me not to leave and not to set forth such absurd conditions either, but just to think about his position for a second. Of course, I had no intention of thinking about him or his predicament at all, and neither did I intend to give up either of my daughters because of my husband. I just wanted to mess with him and make him feel just as bad as he'd made me feel, and luckily, it was working. He's been begging me to change my mind, but I've made it very clear that he can either agree to my conditions or I'm going to file for divorce. I was going to file for divorce either way, but I just wanted to buy myself some time to look for an apartment and a lawyer. Today, a friend of mine told me that I could live with her until I found an apartment. She doesn't know the whole situation but has agreed to let me stay at her place for a while and has even offered to put me in touch with a divorce attorney. A few hours ago, my soon-to-be ex-husband came back from work and actually had the audacity to look shocked when he saw me packing my stuff up to leave. He told me that he hadn't even made up his mind about my conditions yet and said that it was unfair of me to leave before even hearing what he had to say, but I told him that the conditions I'd set forth yesterday were all bogus and there was just no way I was staying with him anymore. I told him to expect to be served with divorce papers in a few days and prepare himself to pay child support anyway since we were in this equally. He freaked out and said that I'd wasted his time and if I had no intention of staying anyway then I shouldn't have misled him and tricked him yesterday. I was in no mood to deal with him and left him in the living room, having a breakdown on his own. It's been a few hours since I left and I'm at my friend's place currently. A couple minutes ago, my husband sent me a message saying that he'd actually spoken to a lawyer today and he decided that he was going to agree to my conditions. Now, needless to say, I was really shocked to learn that because I actually hadn't expected him to agree to my bogus conditions. The point of it was to make my husband realize how ridiculous his suggestion about putting up one of our daughters for adoption was, but apparently, he'd been considering it seriously. Now of course I don't want to entertain that because I really don't think the conditions mean anything. Even if he'd agreed to let me have 100% of his income, I still wouldn't have given up either of my babies. I'm not going to let go of my child for anything in the world, let alone a business that doesn't even exist yet. So I told him that the conditions weren't real, and so neither did any of what he'd done today matter anymore. He called me a psychotic B-word and told me that he was going to ruin me for messing with his head just to get back at him. Ida for putting forth bogus conditions for my husband when he demanded that we give up one of our daughters so that he could save money to invest in his future business. Update 1. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for the overwhelming support and response, and a special hug to everyone who actually bothered to reach out to me and messaged me. I am grateful to everyone who went through my original post and tried to talk to me. I went through all the comments on my post and I've decided that I don't owe my husband an apology in the slightest because he's the one who messed up, not me. I did the right thing, and even if I did try to get into his head with my conditions, he deserved it. A man who's willing to give his own daughter up for adoption is not a man who deserves any sympathy from anyone at all. Now that I think of it, it's actually crazy how he was willing to let go of his own flesh and blood for a non-existent business. He works at a bank, gets paid well, and rarely has to work overtime, so it's not like his current job is eating away at his soul, which is what he makes it sound like. What a ridiculous man. A lot of people in the comments had a lot to say about how fast my relationship had moved and called me stupid for allowing myself to get carried away. I won't say I was stupid, but I do agree that I did lower my standards significantly because I'd had a couple of bad relationships in the past, and in the beginning, my soon-to-be ex seemed like a wonderful guy. Obviously, if I'd had even a clue as to what was going to happen in the future, I wouldn't have started dating him in the first place. At least I have my daughters now, so that's one good thing that came out of this. Looking back now, of course, I think I could have dealt with the situations better than I did, but it's not like I regret anything. There were also some people who were worried about me because they believed that my husband was unhinged and would try to physically attack me. While that could be a possibility, I don't think he'd try because I'm a lot bigger than him physically. I'm the same height as him and weigh slightly more, but I also go to the gym regularly and I'm trained in kickboxing, so it's not exactly like he can take me on. I don't want to shame him, but he's comparatively skinny and I'm not afraid of him attacking me in the least. But of course, him attacking my daughters would be a different story. I'm with him most of the time, though, and my husband doesn't know where my friend lives, so it's unlikely that he'll be able to find us. And in the event that he does somehow manage, my friend and I always take turns watching the kids, so I have nothing to worry about. It's really sweet that everyone's concerned about our well-being, but trust me, guys, we're totally and completely safe here. Update 2. So today I finally filed for divorce. It's been a week since I moved out and I've blocked my husband everywhere, so he hasn't been able to reach out to me yet. He had called my parents a few days back, but they refused to entertain him and blocked him as well. So have all my friends, and right now, he just has no way to contact me, which is peaceful and stress-free for me. I've resumed working from home because I really need the money right now, since I don't think my husband is reliable at all. I'm dog-tired, but this is my best bet moving forward, and I'm lucky that my friend has been kind enough to help me out with a place and also lends a helping hand whenever she's at home and watches the kids for me. She's been doing more than my soon-to-be ex-husband would when I was living with him during the first few weeks after I gave birth. I guess that should have been my signal to hit the road, but I still wanted to continue trying and wanted to make things work with him. I've demanded full custody of my daughters, and I don't think it should be too much trouble obtaining that because, the guy was willing to give one of the two up for adoption, so I don't think I need to elaborate. He's clearly not fit to have kids, but since he's the one who convinced me to have them and he's their biological parent as well, he owes it to them whether he wants to do so or not. My lawyer has told me that he'll be served in a couple of days, and I really just hope that he doesn't decide to contest it or do something unnecessary and stupid. He definitely doesn't want me back, and neither do I, but I wouldn't put it past him to contest the petition or try to obtain joint custody of our daughters just to be petty and drag me into a totally unnecessary legal battle, so I end up wasting my money on court visits and lawyers. It's unlikely, but it's not impossible that he'd do something like that just to be petty. Besides, he did threaten to get back at me for messing with his head in that text that he sent a week back when he found out that I never intended to give either of my daughters up at all and planned on leaving him anyway. I'm not scared, but truth is told, he is in fact financially better off than I am right now, and maybe he can afford to waste a ton of money on lawyers and legal issues, but I really can't because I have myself to worry about along with my daughters. I'm lucky that my friend is letting me live with her for the time being, but this can't be a long-term plan, and I'll have to start looking for an apartment soon enough. After that, there will be rent, electricity, water, groceries, and a million other bills to think about. So I'm definitely a little concerned about what his response to this petition is going to be. I'm keeping my fingers crossed. Update 3. Okay, so my husband finally managed to contact me today. I posted that last update a day before, and not even 24 hours later, he managed to find a way to bother me. I guess I spoke too soon. I had indeed blocked him everywhere, but unfortunately, he knew about my work email address and I hadn't blocked him there. So he sent me a lengthy email about how I was making a mistake by leaving him and that I couldn't just make a mockery out of our marriage by leaving him within less than a year. He told me that his parents had been asking about their granddaughters, but he obviously didn't have anything to tell or show them and was getting pretty desperate from what I gathered after I went through his email. It's not surprising that he wants to appease his parents and hasn't even told them about the divorce yet because they're kind of on the more conservative side and don't approve of the idea of divorce at all. And my husband lives in a house that's being paid for by his parents, so he has to keep them happy or else he might end up on the streets, which is probably why he was so desperate to talk to me and pretend like he'd never called me the B word and threatened to ruin me. He even had the audacity to suggest that we could at least pretend to be married and keep up appearances for his parents' sake for as long as they're around, and whatever he'd inherit from them, we'd split it between the two of us. It was actually pretty funny to go through his email because it made me realize just how delusional this guy was. I mean, if he could suggest that we just give one of our daughters up to save money, then trying to strike a deal with me where we pretend to be married for the sake of his parents isn't even the worst idea that he's come up with. It's ridiculous, the lengths that he's willing to go to just to satisfy his greed, and I actually feel disgusted with myself for ever believing that this man could have been my soulmate. I can't believe I even stayed married to this clown for so long, even after he started distancing himself from me while I was pregnant with his future kids. That should have been it for me, but unfortunately, I'm too much of a romantic to see things for what they really are, and now, this is what I have to deal with. I'm just grateful he's the ridiculous kind of insane that I can laugh at and not the violent kind of insane. I decided to ignore and delete the email and blocked him, but I think he's going to find another way. Update 4. So, my soon-to-be ex-husband decided to visit my parents today. He'd been served with the divorce papers 2 days back and obviously, he wasn't taking that well at all. My father called me a few hours ago and told me that my husband was at his door, screaming at the top of his lungs and asking him to tell him where I was hiding so that he could talk to me and get his daughters back. I could even hear him screaming in the background and decided that I'd had enough, so I called the cops, reported him, and even drove down there myself to press charges for harassing me and my family relentlessly. He seemed pretty torn up when I showed up at my parents' place with the police and tried to talk to me, but I wasn't having any of it. Involving my parents in this crapfest was the last straw for me, and I couldn't let things go anymore just because it was too much of a hassle. He got arrested and was taken away, and when he realized that I was serious and wasn't going to speak to him anymore, he started calling me every derogatory name in the book. As if that was going to bother me at all. Once all that was done with, I came back to my friend's house and my parents decided to drop me off because they wanted to see their granddaughters as well. I hadn't taken them to see my parents for a while because I was always too worried that my husband might do exactly what he did today, and I didn't want to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. I hadn't even realized just how much of my life had been completely taken over with anxiety over what my husband would or wouldn't do, and even though I did say that I was a lot stronger than him and he couldn't overpower me, I was still scared because he actually did seem pretty unhinged now, and I just didn't want my daughters to go through anything. I guess I'm not as fearless as I believed I was, and I definitely am really worried about my babies, even if I'm not worried about myself that much. So I spoke to my parents about this, and even they believe that it's about time that I considered a restraining order against him. This will definitely help me with the custody case as well as getting the child support out of him, so this wasn't totally useless. It's just so frustrating that this is happening at all. I just wish I hadn't married this guy. Update 5. Hey, everyone. So there was a huge argument that I had with my in-laws today. I guess my soon-to-be ex-husband finally gathered the courage to inform his parents that he was getting divorced and also that he was probably going to lose custody of his daughters. And they decided to call me and yell at me over it. I wouldn't have answered the call, but they were smart enough to use a number I didn't have saved on my phone and started off the conversation nicely enough. In fact, they even extended their sympathies to me, but then, they asked me to reconsider the divorce, and when I still refused, they shed any pretense of being understanding and kind and started yelling at me at the top of their lungs. They called me a lot of things and accused me of ruining their son's life on purpose, being a gold digger, and whatnot. I snapped, and I know I should have just hung up, but I ended up yelling right back at them because the one thing that I'm not is a gold digger. I have my own gold, and I'm definitely not going to stay with a guy who is willing to give up his daughter to save some gold and still asks his parents to pay for his accommodation. I told them that their son is a colossal loser and even explained what he'd suggested in detail, and that seemed to quiet them down. Obviously, he'd left out the parts which made him look bad, but now, his parents knew, and what would become of him was also in their hands. I don't think they'd like the idea of their own son suggesting that we give up one of our twins to save money, not after all the crap they talk about family values and morals and blah blah blah. And they definitely won't like the idea that my husband had us pretending to still be married so that he wouldn't be left out of the inheritance. But that's between him and his parents and not me, so I don't have to care about it. I've already filed for a restraining order and hopefully, it'll be granted soon enough. Update 6. Hey. I'm back for one final time because I'm supposed to go back to work physically in a few days. A couple of weeks have passed since my last update, and this is going to be relatively short since all I have to say is that my soon-to-be ex-husband decided not to contest the divorce and also isn't fighting for custody. I don't know exactly what happened, but I'm guessing that his parents kicked him to the curb, and now, If he wants to save money, he can't afford to come after me with all that he's got just to be petty, and he definitely cannot ruin me like he'd originally planned to. I'm thrilled because all that's left to do is the settlement negotiations under the supervision of our respective lawyers, since I do have a restraining order against him now. All I care about is the child support, to be honest. And then I can move on with my life and only think about my beautiful daughters. I've moved into a studio apartment and I do miss my friend, but I try to get my parents to help me out with the kids sometimes. I'm doing my best, but I'm sure as hell going to give my kids the childhood and life they deserve.